The month of seed time hung over the clustered stone homes of the town, a season pregnant with the scent of turned earth and the delicate, heady perfume of fruit tree blossoms that drifted in the cool, brightening air. Sunlight, gaining a steady, nourishing warmth even in the early hours, slanted across the newly mended fences and freshly whitewashed barns, the fruits of communal spring labor. Aldenor Ashler, whose beauty often seemed too refined for the mundane dust of travel, stood near the newly swept central square, his gaze distant as he watched Ellsworth Honeysuckle, her face alight with the cheerful industry of a hobbit setting out wares at a nascent seed fair. He smoothed the lapel of his finely tailored traveling cloak, a garment perhaps a shade too elegant for the rough roads, yet undeniably captivating. Jareth Baladin, ever the observer, leaned against a sturdy oak, a slight, knowing smile playing on his lips, as if contemplating the theatrical possibilities inherent in the town's hopeful bustle. Corvus Glade, impatient for any diversion that promised novelty, was already consulting with Brock Stonebraid, the steadfast dwarf mercenary whose armor gleamed with the diligence of recent polishing. Brock, ever practical, spoke of the need for vigilance now that merchant caravans were once more traversing the routes. It was just as the sun truly cleared the eastern ridge, bathing the world in that clear, golden light that promises growth and toil, that the quiet tension of the morning fractured. A figure, a messenger, breathless and clearly near collapse, spurred by urgency rather than simple haste, galloped into the square. His horse foamed at the mouth, its flanks heaving, the animal clearly having pushed beyond reasonable limits, mirroring the distress of its rider. The man, his face etched with the pale cast of genuine fear, slid from the saddle with clumsy desperation. He did not pause for breath or customary salutation, thrusting a hastily rolled parchment toward the nearest competent-looking figures, which, inevitably, included the known adventurers gathered there. By the grace of the blooming orchards, aid us, the messenger gasped, his voice cracking with the strain of his journey. It is Silverstream, the river, the mighty Silverstream, it has ceased to flow. The banks are dry, the mud cracking, and the very lifeblood of our valley is stolen. A curse, a terrible blight upon the waters. The urgency in his plea cut through the pleasant, hopeful atmosphere of seed time like a shard of ice. The crops were in the ground, the young shoots already requiring measured irrigation, and without the river, the promise of the first planting would turn to ash before the first harvest. Aldenor, his usual performative ease momentarily unsettled by the raw despair in the man's eyes, stepped forward, his expression shifting from thoughtful melancholy to focused concern. The superficiality of the town's temporary peace felt suddenly brittle. Jareth pushed off the oak, his practiced charm immediately engaging the distressed messenger, seeking essential details with honeyed efficiency, while Lucian Whisperwind, ever seeking the darker corners of human reaction, watched the interplay with an almost clinical detachment. Even Valerius Thorn, usually detached, recognized the inherent dramatic weight of a dying river and the immediate need for heroes. They agreed, without significant debate, that this task, so vital to the spring's survival, could not wait for the leisurely pace of the roads. They would depart immediately for Silverstream, leaving the bloom of the orchards behind them to address a sudden, desperate drought. The journey toward Silverstream, though not overly long in leagues, became a study in deepening unease, the seasonal rhythm of renewal suddenly juxtaposed against creeping decay. The roads, usually alive with the cheerful clatter of tinker caravans and the purposeful march of newly grass-fed herds moving toward higher pastures, were strangely quiet, the air thick with apprehension that even the vibrant, blossoming canopy overhead could not dispel. The sunlight filtering through the boughs of early-leaf trees seemed pale, less life-giving, as if the land itself sensed the missing water. They traveled for the better part of a day, the landscape gradually shifting from the well-tended fields near town to the more rugged terrain surrounding the afflicted valley. Corvus, finding the silence tedious, attempted to weave a traveling ballad, but the minor key felt too appropriate, too heavy, and he soon lapsed into brooding silence, his desire for profound emotional response currently satisfied by shared anxiety. When they finally reached the perimeter of Silverstream, the devastation was palpable. The villagers were shadows of themselves, their movements sluggish, their faces drawn and tinged with a frightening pallor. The communal spirit that marked seed time was replaced by a quiet, conserving fear. Cabbages and peas, recently sown, already looked stunted, the soil around them dusty and unwilling to yield. Gillian Hawthorne, unexpectedly encountered among the worried populace, perhaps traveling in the wake of the itinerants, seeking those in need of her learned herbalist skills, offered quiet counsel on the signs of deep dehydration, her cautious demeanor reflecting the trauma of her own past isolation. The group moved through the hushed village toward the dry riverbed. Where once the Silverstream roared, marking the passage of time with its constant sound, there was only a scarred expanse of pale, silted stones, a wound upon the valley floor. It was here, by the dusty desolation, that they were directed toward the dwelling of Alara, the old hermit. Her cottage was situated where the last vestiges of the river's underground moisture might still sustain a small, defiant garden of hardy winter greens, clinging to life. Walking toward it felt like treading on a grave. Alara herself emerged slowly, a figure seemingly woven from the dry reeds and shadows of the riverbank. Her eyes, though ancient, held a disconcerting clarity. After they explained their purpose, her voice, like the dry rustle of autumn leaves, confirmed their worst fears. "It is not nature, but malice," she rasped, leaning heavily on a staff polished smooth by years of watching the water flow. She spoke of a dark, corrupted crystal, emanating a foul, cold energy that she felt even from afar, a thing that had somehow managed to bind and imprison the very spirit of the river. And she named the perpetrator with quiet certainty, Malachor, a wizard disgraced long ago, rumored to have retreated to the festering quiet of the sunken marshes. The news was grim, pulling them from the hopeful toil of spring into the dangerous remnants of winter's lingering evil. The journey was clear: they must venture into the fetid heart of the marshes to confront this source of blight. Before they could even consider the deeper peril, Alara warned them that Malachor's lair was shielded by powerful wards, requiring 3 specific seals to breach: the seal of earth, the seal of wood, and the seal of air. The path of renewal was now blocked by a path of necessary conflict. With the mandate set by Alara, the company turned their faces towards the sunken marshes, a region notorious even in the best of seasons, and doubly perilous now that the drought threatened the outlying forests. The journey was a stark reversal of the blossoming landscape they had left behind. The air grew heavy, humid, and stagnant, lacking the invigorating freshness of the seedtime rains. Travel became a grim slog through rapidly drying undergrowth bordering the swamp proper. Valerius Thorn, whose warrior skills were as sharp as his wit, took the lead, his steps methodical, scanning for hidden snares, constantly mindful that the absence of patrolling guards on these forgotten routes meant they were truly on their own. Lucian Whisperwind moved with an unnerving fluidity, his courtier skills adapting seamlessly to silent navigation, his eyes cataloguing every unusual formation of moss or twisted root, treating the approach as a reconnaissance for a grand, dark performance. After another half-day of increasingly oppressive travel, they reached the periphery of the marshes, a region where the ground seemed to sigh underfoot. Here, the air tasted metallic, and the sunlight struggled to penetrate the thick, sickly green canopy that perpetually hung over the bog. Following Alara's cryptic directions, they sought the location rumored to house the first ward. It took tedious hours, involving Jareth's keen eye for unnatural symmetry and Vanya Stormbright's surprising knack for slipping through dense thickets unnoticed, before they found a small, elevated mound of rock and ancient, petrified wood, a tiny island in the swamp's expanse. Upon this desolate perch rested the seal of earth, a dark, rough-hewn piece of stone radiating dense, stubborn magic. But the seal was not unattended. The guardian was a swamp troll, an embodiment of the stagnant environment, its skin thick with algae and hardened mud, its eyes small, malevolent beads set deep in a massive, scarred skull. The creature roared, a sound like earth-splitting, and charged with surprising speed for its bulk. The battle commenced immediately, the humid silence shattered by the crash of impact. Brock met the charge head-on, his warrior training asserting itself instantly, his movements economical and powerful as he sought to anchor the brute. The troll's strength was immense, its club, likely a uprooted, waterlogged tree trunk, swung with bone-jarring force. Aldenor, finding a grim energy in the necessity of true, unscripted action, moved to flank, using his agility to draw attention while preparing a dazzling, distracting performance of feints and near misses, hoping to lure the creature's sluggish gaze. Even Corvus, usually focused on manipulation, found himself drawing a serviceable blade, his refined movements transitioning into necessary, if ungraceful, defensive postures. The fight was desperate. The troll's hide deflected initial blows, forcing Brock to rely on sheer, stubborn dwarven tenacity. At one point, a sweeping backhand caught Brock across the flank, sending him crashing against the mound, his armor groaning in protest, leaving him momentarily stunned and severely wounded. Jareth, witnessing the near fall of their anchor, reacted with an uncharacteristic burst of fierce protectiveness, distracting the troll with a flurry of expertly tossed, weighted daggers, forcing the creature to shift its focus just as Valerius managed a deep, precise cut into the troll's knee joint. It was a grueling, dispiriting exchange. They were wounded, mud-caked, and breathing the foul air made their lungs ache. Finally, after a concerted effort, Brock rising despite his pain to deliver a powerful overhead strike against the creature's jaw, while Corvus and Valerius pressed their advantage, the troll staggered. With a final, shuddering groan that seemed to vibrate through the marsh itself, it collapsed, its bulk sinking slowly into the mire. Dispirited but victorious, nursing several bruises and minor lacerations, they retrieved the seal of earth. It felt impossibly heavy, cold, and profoundly ancient, a testament to the raw, unyielding nature of the land they sought to heal. The retrieval of the seal of earth had cost them time and energy, yet the urgency of Silverstream's drought, and the knowledge that the sun-drenched orchards were still in the glorious, fragile bloom, spurred them onward. The next phase demanded a shift in strategy, away from brute force and into the subtler arts of diplomacy and wit. They left the oppressive humidity of the swamp's edge, heading toward a region Alara had described as a pocket of pure, resilient life hidden within the surrounding wood, the domain of the second seal. The transition in environment was striking. They emerged from the gloom into a stretch of forest still benefiting from the residual energy of Seedtime's growth, the air growing cleaner, carrying the first faint, sweet notes of wood smoke mixed with pollen. They traveled for another full day, guided now by instinct and the subtle shifts in the forest's vitality, until they reached the hidden grove. It was a space untouched by the broader malaise, a sun-dappled cathedral of ancient trees, their trunks vast and moss-covered, their crowns filtering the sunlight into shifting mosaics on the forest floor. In the center stood the tree ant, a being of immense, slow majesty, its bark resembling the smoothed, weathered surfaces of river stones, its leafy crown a testament to centuries of spring renewals. This protector held the seal of wood, visible embedded gently within a knothole near its base. Knowing that force against such an entity was folly, Aldenor stepped forward. His inherent grace, usually reserved for the stage, served him now as a form of respectful address. He spoke not of conflict, but of the balance of nature, the sorrow of the frozen river. The tree ant listened with the slow deliberation of geological time. Finally, in a voice that sounded like the deep groan of roots shifting in subterranean earth, it posed its challenge. It was a riddle concerning time, growth, and silence, a perfect challenge for Aldenor's introspective nature, honed by long hours of observing the human condition. He pondered the essence of the seed-time cycle, the quiet waiting before the burst of life, and delivered his answer with poetic precision. The tree ant paused, a branch flexing almost imperceptibly, and then, with a slow nod that stirred the air, it yielded. Go with the strength of the rooted things, it boomed, granting him the seal of wood, which felt warm and vital in their hands. They offered sincere thanks, feeling a genuine pang of regret at leaving this sanctuary. The following morning dawned bright, the air filled with the chirping energy of returning life. The quest for the final seal required them to ascend the nearby hills, where the terrain grew rockier, the soil thinner, a landscape more suited to windswept resilience than the lushness of the grove. The seal of air was held by the local sprites, mischievous denizens known for their unpredictable nature. The climb was arduous, taxing their strength more than the swamp had, forcing even the disciplined Brog to pause and truly breathe in the high, crisp air. They found the sprites airy amidst a cluster of windswept standing stones. The sprites, tiny, shimmering figures dancing on the currents, were neither overtly hostile nor immediately helpful. They demanded a playful challenge, a contest of wits and agility rather than strength, much to Corvus's immediate, calculating interest. Lucian, with his spy's ability to adapt and his courtier's charm, engaged them in a dizzying game of illusions and misdirection, blending the performance art they were known for with the raw energy of the sprites. After a protracted, exhausting, yet strangely joyful contest that lasted nearly until dusk, the sprites, finally delighted by a particularly convincing illusion of a falling star conjured by the combined efforts of Aldenor and Jareth, conceded. They tossed the seal of air, a shimmering, feather-like crystal that seemed to hum with unseen currents, into their midst. With all three seals secured, earth, wood, and air, they descended the hill, preparing for the final confrontation, realizing the combination of these disparate elements would be their only key to breaching Malakor's defenses.